I've spent the better part of the last week trying to figure out what's going on with this MFL business because I was dissatisfied with the outcome of our last Tuesday's meeting. And I'm now convinced that having no adopted MFL rule, especially one with such a diluted recovery plan, is actually better than allowing the deeply flawed rule to proceed towards adoption. The proposed rule right now creates a special status for existing large users, that's ag and utilities, whose withdrawals are the major problem. And it will legally preclude third parties like the county from even being able to argue that their continued use of water will harm the water resources. Without this rule, the county will be able to assert that in a permit challenge. So without this rule, all consumptive use applicants must show that their use will not harm water resources. With this rule, those responsible for causing the current impacts are exempt from the requirements to address those impacts, which is exactly the opposite of the way it should be. The proposed rule impermissibly weakens the Water Management District's existing permit requirements and promises certain consumptive use permit applicants that they will not be required to comply with all the statutory permitting criteria. There's no guarantee that in 5, 10, 15, or 20 years this rule will be replaced with a stronger one, because the same players will be making the same arguments as they did in the 1990s in South Florida, but the problem will have gotten worse. So prevention is much cheaper than restoration, and we need to be responsible for the true cost of our water uses. This proposed rule gives utilities and agriculture a pass when it comes to paying their share of the cost to protect our rivers and springs, and the cost will be passed on to the rest of us. The draft recovery strategy, which is the non-rule portion, does not require anyone to do anything. There's no funding associated with it. There are no consequences for inaction or lack of progress. The absence of this rule will likely not affect whether or not the district does the work they've identified in it. So Alachua County is likely to be only one of a number of interveners in the administrative hearing process, but we should not sit back while small nonprofits do all the heavy lifting, especially since well-funded challengers may intervene to prop up the damage they've already done to this rule and to our water resources. And I'll conclude with saying nobody likes it when government agencies tie up valuable resources litigating one another, but the corruption of this process and the resulting damage to our rivers and springs has to be stopped somewhere and sometime. And that's right now, and I'm going to make a motion, and here's a copy of it. And the motion is the Alachua County Commission authorizes the filing of a petition to challenge the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's proposed minimum flows and levels rule for the lower Santa Fe and Itchitecony rivers. This action is necessary because, 1, the proposed rule exempts all existing large water users, including utilities and agriculture, from the statutory requirement now in place to demonstrate that their use won't cause significant harm to our water resources. And point number 2, the proposed rule prevents the water management districts from even considering during the consumptive use permitting process the impacts from these uses on our water resources. And then furthermore, item 3, Alachua County should participate in the public hearing regarding the proposed MFL rule scheduled for April 3rd in Live Oak. 4, Alachua County should schedule our own public hearing on April 1st, where we have an open date, to accept input on the proposed MFL rule and receive suggestions for our position on proposed bills on water-related issues. Number 5, Alachua County should oppose the House bill, that's the bill to exempt the MFL rule from the ratification process, which is a total end around. And 6, Alachua County should authorize staff and our attorney to participate in the Joint Administrative Procedures Committee process. And so ends my motion.
Second.